Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining APQC's March HCM webinar, Shared Services 101, the fundamentals of designing, building, and implementing a service delivery center. A few housekeeping items before we get started today. This is the Q&A tool located on the right side of your screen. If you have any questions during the presentation, please submit them here and we will answer them at the end of the webinar. This webinar will be recorded and you will receive a copy of the slides as well as the recording via email in the next day or so. Our presenters today are Tina Krebs and Trey Robinson. Trey Robinson is a business strategist and shared services leader specializing in financial advisory and shared services design, implementation, and improvement. With 15 years of consulting experience, Trey brings extensive knowledge in creating and implementing shared services strategies, leading major corporate initiatives, and improving profitability for client companies. Tina Krebs is a partner with ScottMadden and leads the firm's human resources practice. Tina joined ScottMadden in 2002 and has expertise in human resources management, shared services design, implementation and improvement, process redesign, and vendor selection and negotiation across a variety of industries including energy, automotive, aerospace and defense, transportation, business services, and healthcare. And with that said, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Trey.
Thank you, Krista, and thanks to everyone for joining us for today's webinar. Before we jump into the content for today's presentation, I'd like to spend just a minute or two on the agenda. First, I'll provide a short overview of our firm, ScottMadden, since many of you may be unfamiliar with us. Next, I'll review the shared services value proposition, including our definition of shared services, some of the broad benefits, an approach to getting started, and example savings that you can expect from implementing a shared services delivery model. Then we'll get into the meat of the presentation. I'll get us started by reviewing the critical success factors for your business case. We'll provide an overview, walk you through the major steps, highlight practices that we believe lead to a strong case, and share a few ideas on how to avoid pitfalls. Then I'll turn it over to Tina, who will share 10 of the most common implementation challenges we see and how to avoid them. She'll also present 3 keys to startup success, including the role of governance, ways to manage performance, and the value of continuous improvement. Because a lot of content will be shared during today's session, we have included our contact information on the last page in the event that any of you have follow-up questions or would like additional information. ScottMadden is a general management consulting firm that was established in 1983. We're a mid-sized firm of over 100 employees with offices in Raleigh and Atlanta. Despite having only 2 offices, we assist clients all over the United States, Canada, and Latin America. Our firm has 2 major practice areas, energy and corporate and shared services. We also have 2 smaller incubator practices, including clean tech and sustainability and federal government. Because we only have 2 major practice areas, our consultants are dedicated fully to helping our clients in these areas. We're also different from many of the other firms out there in how we work. We use small, dedicated teams of consultants to assist our clients, and our partners play an active role in our engagements. Tina and I dedicate over half our time to rolling up our sleeves and participating directly in project work. While we have the tools and templates that you would expect from a consulting firm, we also personalize our solutions to meet our clients' needs. Every project and every client are unique, and we treat them that way. Our corporate and shared services practice grew out of our energy practice. In the 1980s, many energy firms were exploring deregulated businesses in addition to their core regulated business. During this time, they set up service companies to manage and track the services provided to their various companies. These service companies were our first foray into shared services, and by the early 90s, we established a shared services practice dedicated to serving clients across a variety of industries. At ScottMadden, we focus primarily on the big 4 shared services functions: finance and accounting, which is where I spend most of my time; human resources, which is Tina's specialty; information technology; and supply chain. In addition, we assist clients with some of the less common shared services functions, including real estate and facilities, safety, health, and environmental, fleet management, marketing, legal, and other administrative services. We're also seeing more and more multifunction shared service organizations that, as their name suggests, include more than one function. Many of our clients are using multifunction shared services to help facilitate the move to end-to-end processes like procure to pay. Our clients cross a broad array of industries. On this slide, we have listed just a few. Interestingly enough, many of our clients not only have used ScottMadden to help with an assessment or implementation, but they call us back as they mature to help them add new services, new customers, or new geographies, or help them just identify new ways to improve. Now that you've heard a little bit about our firm, let's switch gears and jump into some of the content of the presentation. In the next section, we'll discuss the shared services value proposition. The definition of shared services varies widely, so we thought we'd get everyone grounded by sharing ScottMadden's definition. We believe that shared services is when a business consolidates its support functions to serve the corporation and its business units, operating as a business within a business, utilizing a well-defined infrastructure to enable higher value service delivery. Most people understand the consolidation as part of shared services, but one of the ways that we differentiate our approach is to think of shared services as a business within a business. This means that it treats its customers as if they have a choice of whether or not to use it, even if they don't. In addition, a true shared services organization provides clearly defined services, provides prices for those services, and utilizes the infrastructure necessary to manage the delivery of those services. Hopefully, our definition helps you understand how we think of shared services. On this slide, we attempt to capture the essence of what that definition means. When implemented appropriately, shared services should deliver the benefits of centralized services like economies of scale and standardized processes, as well as the benefits of decentralized services like focus on the customer and business intelligence. Interestingly, we are seeing more and more shared services organizations harness all of the data that they have to provide greater insight into business opportunities. These leading companies are establishing business analytics organizations. These organizations not only capture internal metrics used by shared services, but they also capture, synthesize, and analyze information that can help internal customers deliver greater value in their own businesses. Finally, the characteristics of a leading shared services organization include an institutionalized service culture, an efficient delivery model, and leading business practices. Our approach to shared services crosses four major phases. During the design phase, companies focus on developing the overall shared services strategy, benchmarking against others, developing the business case, and beginning the change management process. Some ask why we begin change management activities before the decide phase is complete, but studies frequently show that change management is one of the top 3 areas companies wish they spent more time delivering, the other 2 being communications and training. Companies are in the decide phase before implementing shared services or whenever they're considering adding new services, expanding functions, or the like. We'll focus on these process steps in the next section. The decide and build phases, design and build phases, are sometimes referred to as implementation. This is an area where we think we excel, and Tina will highlight implementation challenges and opportunities later in the presentation. The improve phase occurs post-implementation, and it's usually seen in mature shared services organizations. We're often asked to perform health checks to help companies with process improvement, customer satisfaction, and other ideas for optimizing performance. One of those common questions we hear is, what kind of savings are really possible? This slide describes the actual benefits that our clients have seen by implementing shared services. The overall savings varies, but headcount savings can range from 20 to 40%. One of the things that impacts savings most is how decentralized an organization is prior to implementing shared services. More decentralized companies with many policy and process differences will realize greater savings than those that are more centralized or have established common policies and processes. When it comes to payback period, we target a payback of less than 3 years, with many of our clients realizing payback periods of less than 2 years. While most people are focused on the hard dollar savings that companies achieve by implementing shared services, There are some pretty compelling soft benefits as well. Benefits like improved customer satisfaction, improved compliance, and greater scalability are often overlooked. If your company plans to grow through acquisition, Shared Services offers a platform to enable rapid integration. During our assessment process, we often recommend that companies establish a baseline for customer satisfaction. This provides a foundation for improvement and also assists with change management as it creates a data-driven way to demonstrate non-financial benefits. When shared services organizations are implemented successfully, customer satisfaction may improve as much as 20%. Now that we've set the foundation for shared services, let's discuss the critical success factors for your business case. Every business case is comprised of two fundamental elements, a current state assessment and a future state design. During the current state assessment, we focus on understanding the baseline. This involves understanding a significant amount of information about the processes that are in scope. When assessing the current state, we want to understand the number of full-time equivalent resources performing the activities and the cost of those activities, including both labor and non-labor. We're also interested in understanding the systems, tools, and technologies that are in use, the organizational structure, the underlying business drivers, and the transaction volumes that drive work, like the number of invoices or the number of job requisitions. During the future state design, we are interested in defining at a high level the attributes of the new shared services organization. This includes any potential improvements that might be achieved through process efficiencies, automation, or reduced labor and non-labor costs. We also define the structure of the service delivery model in the new organization. Once the current state baseline is well understood and the future state model is developed, the business case is established as a financial representation of the difference between the two. Labor and non-labor savings are captured, as are the recurring costs of the new shared services organization. Finally, the implementation costs and timeline are incorporated to complete the overall picture. On this slide, we'll provide a little bit more background about the current state assessment. Typically, the current state assessment is comprised of different means of gathering data. The first way to gather data is quantitative in nature. It includes an activity model that captures the time and cost associated with every activity being assessed. At ScottMadden, we use an online workload survey tool to help us capture this data. We survey all employees who perform the activities to determine the full-time equivalents associated with each activity. We then incorporate labor costs, including salaries, bonuses, and benefits, to determine activity costs. If you don't have an internal survey tool, you can use Excel to manually survey employees, which we've done in the past. In addition to the workload survey, we also suggest submitting a data request to capture process documentation, organizational charts, technologies, and transaction volumes. The second way to gather data is qualitative. We suggest conducting interviews to gather context. It's difficult to get through data alone. By interviewing both resources who perform the processes and other leaders and stakeholders, insight can be gained into business drivers, process exceptions, appropriate benchmarks you may want to select for comparison, and overall change readiness. It is also at this stage we recommend that a customer satisfaction baseline be captured. We use an online survey tool that allows participants to remain anonymous. By using both quantitative and qualitative data, the current state assessment provides a comprehensive picture of existing operations and sets the stage for an objective analysis. On this slide, we describe the typical analyses that result from a current state assessment. We capture FTEs and labor costs by activity to get an understanding of the scale of activities, how many people are doing them, and how much they cost. This analysis also describes where resources are actually spending their time, which is often different from management assumptions or expectations based on organizational charts. In addition, we capture the type of work that is being performed. Work may be advisement, or functional, or strategic, or transactional. When evaluating the work type by employee level, disconnects between the position and the work being performed are evident. Ideally, a new shared services organization will align individual skills with the type of work performed to create the most efficient model. Now that the current state assessment is complete, let's spend a few minutes on the future state design. In most shared services assessments, headcount reductions are the largest driver of labor savings. In our experience, headcount reductions are typically 70 to 90% of overall shared services savings. When capturing headcount savings, make sure that you include all of the components of labor, including salary, bonuses, and benefits. In addition to headcount savings, labor savings may also be realized by locating a new shared services organization in an area with lower wage levels. When looking at the drivers of labor savings, three types make up the majority: process harmonization, technology automation, and labor arbitrage. Of these, labor savings achieved through process harmonization are the largest. In addition to labor savings, other quantifiable benefits include the savings achieved by consolidating and sunsetting existing technologies. Vendor-related savings may also be achieved by consolidating existing contracts. This is more common in HR shared services implementations than in finance implementations, but may exist in both. Finally, there may be some savings available by moving the shared services organization to a new, lower-cost facility with reduced lease rates. In order to estimate potential headcount savings, benchmarks may be used to provide an unbiased and transparent approach. When thinking about benchmarks, there are three different methods that can be considered: benchmarking internally, benchmarking against industry, and benchmarking against leading practices. Benchmarking internally often provides the least resistance, but large gains may be hindered if comparisons are only made to existing company locations. Benchmarking against industry will often achieve some resistance, but it does force a company to look externally to similar companies. In addition, it stretches the realm of the possibility without pushing too hard. Benchmarking against leading practices will provide the largest potential savings, but usually receives the greatest resistance. We typically build our business cases on more conservative numbers, but will strive to achieve leading practices with our shared services design. At ScottMadden, we believe that benchmarks are directionally correct and should be applied with some level of judgment. They should not reduce or eliminate the use of common sense. As we mentioned in the discussion on the value proposition of shared services, qualitative benefits should also be incorporated. On this slide, we describe four major qualitative benefits: increased customer orientation, improved controls, enabled decision-making, and enabled future efficiencies. While many CFOs may not be as interested in the software benefits, qualitative benefits are often the tiebreaker when considering business cases with similar financial results. Once the business case has been approved, the projected benefits and costs should be measured and tracked to ensure that estimated savings are actually achieved. Once the current state assessment and future state design are complete, the business case can be created. When thinking about the cost of implementation, different categories should be considered. First, labor costs should be calculated. In the new shared services model, a number of variables should be evaluated, including the salaries of new hires, the timing of hiring and termination, and the cost of hiring and severance. Technology costs should be estimated for any new tools that are recommended. New technologies are requiring less upfront costs as cloud solutions are becoming readily available, but both one-time implementation and recurring costs should be captured. Consulting and project team costs should also be captured, including the cost of internal IT resources if they're used. Additional costs to incorporate are those related to a new site, if required, and marketing and training. Marketing costs are rarely considered, but because we believe that shared services is a business within a business, the new organization needs to be advertised and marketed accordingly. We also believe that a complete business case includes a detailed sensitivity analysis. A sensitivity analysis allows you to estimate the financial impact if something doesn't go according to plan, which happens in nearly every implementation. A sensitivity analysis also creates a range of benefits that places higher and lower guardrails on the expected net savings. These allow broader discussions and don't limit the business case to being perfect to be compelling. On this slide, the sensitivities indicate that the payback will likely occur between 2012 and 2013. If this range is tolerable for management, the range provides a realistic expectation even if unexpected things occur during the implementation. When thinking about the type of sensitivities to include in an assessment, there are no right or wrong answers. On this slide, we highlight some of the most common, including changes in future state headcount, implementation timelines, technology costs, and facility costs. One point to note, the variables with the largest sensitivities are almost always those that are recurring. In this example, future state headcount is the most sensitive variable because these costs are significant and they recur every year. The cost of technology is less sensitive because the bulk of these costs are one-time implementation expenditures, assuming low recurring operation and maintenance costs. The business case is the culmination of a shared services assessment. Developing a compelling yet conservative business case is the fundamental component that supports the approval to proceed with design and implementation. Now that we've completed our review of the business case, I'll turn the presentation over to Tina to discuss implementation challenges and opportunities.
Thank you, Trey. When implementing a shared services organization, there are multiple work streams and tasks to manage and a variety of decisions to make along the way. And after many, many implementations, we wanted to share with you the top implementation challenges that we typically see with our clients or that we hear about from other organizations' implementations. On this slide, you see the top 10 implementation challenges that we'll be covering today. The first being obtaining and maintaining sponsorship. The second and third is really focused on the elements of managing the project well with planning the implementation and staffing the project. The fourth being integrating technologies. The fifth being getting and sticking to decisions, as well as avoiding surprises and mitigating risks. The seventh would be selecting the right staff for your future organization. And then 8 and 9 is really focused on preparing both your customers and stakeholders and your staff for the launch. And then lastly, we'll be looking at testing launch readiness. One of the biggest challenges that organizations face when launching shared services is managing the change effectively among stakeholders and customers. You are going to be dependent upon your executive sponsor to help build support for the change within the executive suite, as well as communicate the benefits to and set expectations with impacted populations. In addition, this person is going to need to persuade key stakeholders who may be harboring reservations or are actively campaigning against the migration to shared services. Because of this, you want to make sure you have clearly identified the strengths and weaknesses of your executive sponsor at the outset of the project and assemble the support structure to help your sponsor manage his or her weaknesses. This could be as simple as providing coaching opportunities throughout the project or as thorough as assembling a steering committee where the responsibilities of the executive sponsor are spread across individuals whose strengths align with the task. Another important task for ensuring lasting sponsorship of your project is to conduct a stakeholder assessment and build a plan on how to move stakeholders to the level of support you need for the project. By conducting stakeholder assessments on the front end, you can determine what support you will need to provide to different leadership across the business to help facilitate the change and get the message out to the employees or management. This is critical because at a minimum, you want all stakeholders to be neutral about the change, if not in the positive spectrum. The second challenge we see is poor planning around project resource requirements. When building your Microsoft project plan, make sure it's designed to include major processes, activities, tasks, and durations while factoring in internal dependencies and external constraints, such as business as usual activities and other external initiatives, as well as project dependencies. Some companies develop a resource-loaded model where all resources, both full and part-time, for the project are tracked by month and task to understand when peak activities are occurring and where additional support may be required. To supplement this need, we do see companies use a variety of external support models. And whether they're used in an advisory capacity or as staff augmentation, external support is typically brought in when the organization does not have the skill set or resource availability to fully support the project. Typical external skill sets that we've seen and sought by organizations implementing shared services would be communications and change management, technical advisory, marketing, training, and functional consulting. In other words, people that have been there and done that before. One word of caution, if you are using external support, ensure the project team is heavily loaded towards client team members in order to foster knowledge transfer. It is typical for client team members to transition from participating on the implementation project team to managing the shared services center, and it would be ideal for these individuals to understand the model and to understand why certain decisions had been made during implementation. One of the most critical items when building your project subteams is staffing the right people with the right skill sets on the team. Make sure that when you are selecting individuals for the subteams that they have the skills necessary to accomplish the tasks they need to complete. If you put someone in charge of change management that doesn't like to interact with people or who may not be good at boiling down the discussion to the most important message that needs to go to stakeholders, this is most likely not a good match. Similarly, if an individual who doesn't like change is tagged as the head of the process workstream, this will not enable the organization to achieve all of the efficiencies that are possible. The fourth challenge we see is the inability to integrate technologies efficiently or effectively. Implementation tasks on the technology workstream include everything from plan and design of the system through the RFP and selection process to supporting configuration and testing, and finally, training resources on the new system. Unfortunately, with this integration activity comes a lot of headaches. There are several examples listed on this page that highlight the relationship of your project team with the IT organization. These projects are highly dependent on IT's guidance and assistance, no matter if you're going to use on-premise solutions or SaaS-based solutions. So our advice to you is to involve the IT resources from the start of the project, conduct resource analysis early in the project, understand IT's lead times and their requirements, and confirm throughout the project that the IT resources understand your project's requirements. Other potential technology hurdles involve system and vendor shortfalls. Either the functionality will not do what you thought it would do, or the vendor is not delivering what you anticipated. In both of these scenarios, establish periodic checkpoints to ensure the vendors are meeting your expectations and to manage change control as necessary changes are made. All of these hurdles can be managed with just a little bit of foresight and solid project management techniques, allowing your implementation project to stay on track. Two of the most frustrating challenges that implementation teams deal with is the inability to make accurate, timely decisions and the revisiting of decisions. Nothing can slow down a project faster than the revisiting of service center scope midway through the project, or an inability for the team to decide how the project is going to be phased. We believe that establishing an efficient, disciplined decision-making process is a strategic move when launching your implementation project. Identifying who will be responsible for making the final decision, establishing deadlines for big decisions in the plan, documenting the decisions that were made, who was present, and what the drivers were, and setting up a change control process can really help maintain project traction and ensure key project milestones aren't jeopardized. The sixth challenge is focused on risk management. In shared services implementations, there is always the potential for schedule slippage due to a variety of reasons. Resources have been pulled into business as usual activities or competing projects. Technology installation is experiencing delays, or business units are pushing back on the concept and are causing problems by not providing materials when asked. This list can go on and on. We believe putting in place a strong risk management structure and actively monitoring risks throughout the project will help mitigate any of the potential issues that could impact critical path items and project milestones. On the next page, This is an example of a risk management plan that is broken into two categories: those risks that need to be actively managed now, and those risks that should be monitored throughout the project. By capturing the risk, what project streams it could impact, what the indicators could be, who owns monitoring the risk activity, and thinking through mitigation strategies, the team can be prepared to deal with whatever issue comes up. The seventh challenge is focused on selecting the right staff for your future organization. Much like when you are building your project team, when staffing your shared services organization, you also need to make sure that you are selecting people with the right skills and competencies to fill the positions. By predefining and communicating these core competencies and skills required for the positions you will be filling, and creating a structured, equitable approach to staffing the organization, employees in your company will understand how they stack up against the job requirements and appreciate being given a fair opportunity to apply for the roles. There are multiple ways to staff the organization, but we always recommend the zero-based approach. On your slide in front of you, you see the zero-based approach on the left bottom corner. In this approach, all jobs are considered open, and candidates are able to bid or preference for the positions based on their interests. This tends to be perceived as the most fair and tends to yield the best match of people with skills, but can be time-consuming and disruptive to incumbents whose jobs are not changing. When asked what the biggest challenge was during implementation projects, 9 times out of 10, you will hear change management from the respondents. We have found that if change management is integrated into the overall project plan and considered a work stream versus an afterthought, the change will be more successful. Helping your customers and stakeholders understand what is changing is very difficult to do because there are so many elements that are changing during a shared services implementation. Constant, clear communication is key. Even using a tool as simple as a start-stop-continue matrix that is aligned with future state processes can bridge the gap of knowledge that a new model has introduced to the organization. We recommend staffing this work stream with a leader that has worked within the function before, preferably had a role in the business, has great communication skills, and can be creative. This team will be responsible for one of the biggest aspects of the project, enabling your stakeholders and customers to work within the new model so that they can understand where to go, how to go, and for what service. Planning and executing this will be critical to your change management success, and your project will not be successful without a detailed, integrated change management plan. Another challenge is training. Training, while also critical to the success of the launch, is often compromised to allow more time or resources for other tasks like technology testing or facilities implementation. However, it can carry or sink shared services depending on the effort extended. The companies that are most successful with training and preparation for the new model spend quite a bit of time planning the events around training. This involves assessing constituencies that need to be trained and individual training needs by curriculum, and developing a detailed plan as a result of this assessment. Shared services training plans should include a company overview, functional content, customer service, process, and technology training modules at a minimum. Our last implementation challenge is focused on testing launch readiness. We all know that testing of processes, training, and technologies is critical to success. However, we frequently see that implementation stops short of ensuring all activities have yielded the desired results. One way to ensure everything is ready to go is to conduct a business simulation. Business simulation replicates the business environment expected to be in place during steady-state operations. It tests forms, tools, technologies, and processes that support service completion, and it trains staff on the new processes. One of the most important side benefits to conducting a simulation is the natural change management that occurs. By leveraging role players across the organization to request and receive service in this test environment, customers and stakeholders are brought into the process early, building a future support network. Every single one of our clients have found this step to be invaluable. Okay, now that your shared services organization is designed, built, and launched, we wanted to cover 3 primary activities that are key to maintaining a successful startup organization. Trey highlighted these right on the front end, but it's focused on establishing and enforcing governance for your organization, managing performance, and enabling continuous improvement going forward. The first is establishing and enforcing governance for the new organization. Without a governance board or committee, how would goals such as standardization, improved service, cost savings, and increased agility be accomplished? The governance group will set the structure and rules, oversee it, and make multiple difficult decisions in order to maintain shared services goals. So how do you establish an effective governance model? Well, we would advise you to, number 1, match the structure to the potential for conflict. So the higher the potential for conflict, the more formal your structure should be. Number 2, involve your customers. This helps you ensure that you are making decisions that will not be received negatively by the business. And number 3, establish criteria in advance for making key decisions. On this page, you will see an example governance board that sits on top of the shared services organization. It is comprised of executives from key business units, representatives from support organizations, and the shared services leader. With this organization structure, you would gain customer insight, integrate well with other business initiatives, and formalize the process for cross-functional approval of shared services projects. We've seen this structure set up in different ways, so you would need to establish it in the way that most effectively supports your business goals. The second key to establishing a successful shared services operation is the utilization of service level agreements. We've seen a trend of companies moving away from this practice, and we believe for companies just starting with shared services that this is a mistake. To effectively manage performance of your shared services center, regular monitoring and reporting on performance is critical. These service levels are the basis of your discussion when you are reporting out on performance to stakeholders. Drilling down into how the operation is performing against predefined standards and customer satisfaction ratings can help you and your customer figure out what the primary operational elements are that need to be tweaked on a go-forward basis. And SLAs are important for outlining your expectations for your customer as well. Our third suggestion for a successful shared services operation is to establish a group within your operation that focuses on continuous improvement across the model. You want dedicated resources available to look across the model, outside of just the service center, to figure out how to continually evolve and drive further efficiencies and value from the operation. This group can report to your shared services operation or to a functional leader, but it needs to have accountability for processes and operations that are broader than just the service center. We believe these 3 elements, the governance structure, establishing SLAs, and having a continuous improvement organization, that if they're put in place, they will enable you at a minimum to successfully maintain, but most likely will continuously improve your shared services operation. And with that, we've finished our presentation, and we're opening it up for questions.
Great, thank you. And remember, if you have any questions, please submit them on the Q&A tool located on the right side of your screen, and we will get to those. We've had a few come in already. The first question is, how do you transition existing roles into the future state when individuals are only completing a portion of the work moving to a service center?
Okay, I'll take that. With many of our clients, and this is a frequent question that we get at conferences, people are doing portions of activity that contribute to the overall shared services model. So if I'm spending 40% of my time doing a transactional type activity that's going to move to the service center, but the rest of activity that's being left with me isn't going away, how do I reallocate my resources? The concern is just, either the work needs to be absorbed by somebody else, or they're worried that there's going to be work behind that there's just not anybody left to do. And what we typically recommend for our clients is that they really take a holistic look at the organization that's being left behind and redesign that organization in a way that either the work is absorbed or it's done differently versus just shifting it around. When we are implementing shared services operations, the entire model is looked at. So it's not on the HR side, it's not just looking at the service center, but it's looking at the COEs, the service center, and the HR field team that remains.
Okay, great. Another question is regarding the labor savings in your business case that Trey talked about earlier on. How do I ensure that I'm getting honest responses from participants in an FTE survey?
I'll take that one. I think that there are a few ways that we do that. First of all, when we provide the surveys, we give them to a large number of people so we're able to balance a number of the responses over time. But because an individual has to assign 100% of their time, it's difficult to manipulate the survey too much. In addition, we'll do interviews with management and leadership to make sure we understand the context of what's going on, and that gives us some insight as to whether the surveys are misleading or not. We'll also on occasion do site visits or even sometimes spend a little bit of time shadowing process to make sure we understand them along the way. So those are other ways that we make sure that we understand exactly what's going on. But probably the most important thing in this area is that we have to make sure that good communication to employees has been done in advance of the survey. I think if you understand clearly what the purpose of the survey is and how the data that you provide will be used, you're much more likely to provide honest answers.
Great. Another question we had is, how do you keep HR employees engaged during implementation?
That's a great question, and one that we're actually dealing with right now at my current client. I think it also depends on the duration of your implementation. So, for example, right now our implementation is spread over 2 to 3 years, and keeping employees engaged during that time period when, to them, out in the field especially, not a lot is happening, it's a difficult change management task to deal with. But what we've previously done on many of our projects that I believe has worked well is having a very detailed change management communications plan that has, touch points throughout each quarter or, every couple months that you're letting people out in the field know what's happening and what change is evolving so that they feel like it's not being done in a vacuum, as well as involving them within the different work streams. So, for example, if you're doing policy harmonization or process standardization or harmonization, you have people from the different business units also participating to provide kind of field guidance so that they don't feel like it's being done in a vacuum again. So again, I think most of it is change management as well as just involvement within the project team if you can.
Great. And then another question is, what functions could be in a COE? Are engineering and other non-traditional areas a possibility?
I'll take that. This is Trey. I think that COEs, or Centers of Expertise, are a little bit of a challenging topic. They're not well understood. When we think of COEs, we think of work that is programmatic in nature. Often they're higher level resources that do the work, and the work that they do often will involve judgment and decision making. Also, the folks who are in COEs tend to have strong problem-solving and critical thinking skills. It's more common in HR than it is in finance and other areas. In HR, the most common examples are probably compensation, benefits, organizational learning and development, and talent acquisition. On the finance side, it's just really beginning to mature a bit more, and there you see things like budgeting and forecasting, financial planning and analysis, and occasionally treasury. Outside of HR and finance, though, other functions are beginning to embrace centers of expertise. We often see them in safety, health, and environmental. That's one we've recently implemented at a large client of ours. We do see engineering services as a potential opportunity for a COE, and probably the hottest topic right now regarding COEs is the implementation of a business analytics group within the shared service center itself.
Great. Another question we have is, have you ever worked with a state public higher education system that will do shared services across multiple public universities? Do you have any experience of work with that?
I can take this one. I know that we have done multiple variations of shared services for higher education institutions. One of them I know that we did set up, specifically it was related to the payroll process, that it was being shared across multiple universities. But this is a model that is somewhat dependent on the university structure that we're working with, and I think every single university shared services that we've set up has been slightly different. Trey, I'm sure you can weigh on this as well, but I know that it is possible to spread it across multiple universities.
It is, and I also think that this is an area that we're seeing more and more interest. I think higher education maybe was not there at the outset of the shared services, evolution, if you will, but over the past several years, we've seen significantly more interest in shared services from higher learning organizations.
Great. Another question is, how long does it typically take an organization to make the decision to move to an HR shared services or operations model?
I think, well, it depends on the client. That's a very consulting response, but we've had some clients that it's taken them 5 years. They've started on the journey, and it just took them that long to either gather support across the organization to spend the money to do it, as well as some people that they're interested in it. They attend a conference, they come in, they do a 3-month assessment, and then they decide to proceed with implementation, with maybe the scope being smaller than like a full-scale implementation. So typically an assessment can be anywhere from 3 to 4 months to several years, depending on just how open your executive suite is to spending money on shared services.
I think that the work associated with the assessment, like Tina said, is maybe 3 months. So to do the current state, the future state, the business case, and develop an implementation plan may only be 3 or 4 months, maybe on the high side. And then the real work is selling that case to leadership, which can take much longer.
Absolutely.
All right. And in your experience, have you seen more shared service centers being built up onshore or offshore? I don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah, I'll take this one. I think that historically onshore has been more common. Folks are moving offshore. Some will have captive centers offshore, or they're outsource their work out offshore. But I think overall onshore is more common to start. We typically will advise our clients to build it onshore if you can. There are many low-cost areas in the United States now, especially as we've come out of the Great Recession, that still are reasonably low cost when compared to China, for example. Much closer to home when it comes to time zones, and have the language skills, especially if you're a domestic company. That being said, once you're established onshore and you've achieved as efficient of an organization as you can, we do think it may make sense to look offshore to gain that last bit of value you might get from lower wage rates at other countries.
All right, great. And here is a contact information for both Tina and Trey, and I'll make sure in the follow-up email you'll receive with the slides and recording, you will see this in there. So if you have any other questions, you can, I'm sure, reach out to them. And now I'm going to turn over to Alyssa Tucker, who is our HCM Research Program Manager here at APTC. She's going to give a few closing thoughts before we end the webinar, and then we'll go from there. Alyssa?
Wonderful. Thank you, Krista. As Krista said, I am APQC's Program Manager focused on human capital management research, and I'd like to extend a big thank you to Tina Krebs and Trey Robinson of ScottMadden for sharing their wealth of expertise with us today. I think I can speak for all of our listeners that you've just shared so much valuable information that you've learned in the trenches, and we've really all benefited today, so we appreciate that. To conclude today's webinar, I'd like to point out some APQC resources that our listeners can use to take back to their organizations today and take all this information that we learned from ScottMadden and take some next steps on it. These resources are hyperlinked on these slides, and you will receive an email with the slide deck in the next couple of days so that you can access these materials easily. They're housed in APQC's knowledge base. They are free to all APQC member organizations. If you're not part of an APQC member organization, there are pieces throughout here that will be available to you as well so that you can see what APQC membership has to offer. So we hope that these resources will help you in evaluating the need at your organization for an HR shared services approach, and then help you in building the business case and in planning implementation. This first resource can help you with the decide phase, as ScottMadden talked about. It is a checklist that can be used to assess your organization's need potentially for an HR shared services center. It allows you to quickly take a high-level look at the current level of service that your HR organization is delivering, and then also helps you develop a picture of your desired future state for HR at your organization. And then moving forward, we have some additional support that can help you in building an HR shared service organization business case. Two recently completed APQC research reports that reveal some really interesting findings, a link between efficient and effective HR service delivery and an HR function operating in a strategic business partner capacity with leadership. So today we heard ScottMadden talk about many of the hard dollar benefits as well as the soft dollar benefits that can come from an HR shared services model. This research shows one of the more softer benefits, which is it can free up an organization's HR leaders to have more time to spend advising the business executives on business strategy and how HR policies and practices can help the organization successfully implement that strategy. And then finally, APQC has a range of resources to help you plan a transformation should you decide to move to an HR shared services model. We heard so much today from Tina about the importance of change management, and APQC has a wealth of change management resources that can guide you in dealing with that implementation challenge number 8 that Tina talked about, which is preparing customers and stakeholders for the HR shared services transition. So look for this slide deck in your email over the next couple of days, and take a look at these resources, and we hope you'll be able to combine them with all of the expertise we learned today from ScottMadden, and that you can put that into practice in your organization. And Krista, I'll turn it over to you to conclude today's call.
Great, and thank you. And I just want to say thank you again to ScottMadden and Tina and Trey for a wonderful presentation, and thanks Alyssa for some of the content we have to share on shared services. And I just want to remind everyone, we do have a part 2, a little bit more of an advanced class to this, called Shared Services 501, the next generation of shared services. So once you've implemented now the now what, and that'll be Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Central Time. If you're interested in that, you can reach out to us, and we will love to have you register. And again, you will see an email in the next couple of days with a link to the recording in the slides. And with that, we're going to go ahead and end the call, and I hope everyone has a great day, and thank you so much for joining our webinar today.